Well, I thought I'd start off with giving you a little bit of an overview of what our world looks like now and some of the time. We're one of the only places in the world that I've found and been to that has 45 plus inches of rain a year or up to, with a dry summer. Fact is, we went from 1st of May till to the October with less than like an inch or so. That's why we grow the crops we grow. And not only is the summer dry, but our humidity a lot of days will be down below 30, maybe if I have seen 10. So it's conducive to what we do, but almost every evening we'll have a dew because we're only 60 miles from the ocean. Thank heavens there's a ring of mountains out there, but it keeps a little bit. This is a little bit of the wind damage we get because a large percentage of what we harvested is swath. This is a light crop, it's metaphome. I'll talk about it a little bit later. Typical, happens to be harvesting bayou kale, but it's same as ryegrass as far as technique. This gives you a little idea how wet the fields are. A lot of our wet fields will be like this from around the 1st of November till the 1st of March, but some of the crops we grow can do real well in it. And this here's what a neighbor built up till he broke his axles to try and drain. This little bit idea of the soil profile. We've had some soil judging tests at our places, and you can see the heavy. Probably a better condition than some of it because that was in an orchard for 20 years, tilled once, put into wheat, and then been pasture up till a couple years ago when this was taken. Some of our soils are montmorillonite clays. That stick there is stuck in the ground 18 inches at that diameter. I didn't have to shove it, it just falls in. So people say, well, I need the subsoil. I said, how in the heck can you move any more soil than Mother Nature's moving? We do graze our fields, even those wet ones. Cattle, some. At one time here about a month ago, our son-in-law had probably about 1,000 head on those wet fields. They're gone now. Use sheep. This happens to be on white clover. And then if you look in the background there, you can see part of what we've inherited now. And a lot of baby lambs or young lambs are killed by the eagles. Fact is, some friends a couple years ago saw an eagle taking on a 60-pound lamb. So now I'll get into a little what I'm supposed to talk about. I'm real high on tall fescue in our world, but I think it has some benefits in other worlds. A couple of reasons is it has one of the highest affinities for nitrogen. Consequently, that's why you don't mix it with many other grasses, because they will not eat it, because nitrogen's protein, protein's bitter. On the other hand, if that's all they got, they'll do fine. You can also see these barbs. This is fawn fescue. This is the typical 20 Kentucky 31. And then the midrib on the back, which I couldn't get a picture of, had it also. But look at these. These are the new varieties that are called soft leaf varieties. And they are soft enough, if you got a sward about this high, it's just unreal what it feels like. It's just as soft as a perennial ryegrass or something like that. So one of the crops I'm really high on is chicory. Part of it's because in our world they could probably produce an excess of 8 tons of dry matter a year, extremely drought tolerant, and maybe that'll tell you a little bit of why. The 4-H chicories do not all have that root system. I just this fall saw these plants. I've only been growing chicory for 12, 14 years, and they're just probably 1/10 of 1%. These plants just stood out with leaves corrupt. And maybe a little later I'll show you a picture with what normally a thin stem. But having said that, there's one of those big stems. There's one of them. That's how bad sheep hate them. They had all that lush pasture, and they still went ahead and chewed on the stems. And part of the reason they eat the stems well is they're low in fiber. And, the stem will just break even when it gets dry. And chicory's adapted to lots of climates. Almost anywhere I've traveled in, especially Oregon, dry land, etc., there's wild chicory growing. This is a seed crop field post-harvest. This here is some that I was making for baleage for the college to do some research on. I baled up some for the researcher, and he started feeding it to his lambs, and he sent me a text, and he says, "Boy, this chicory's awful steamy." And then he come back and he says, "No, I meant stemmy." The next day he sent me a text and he says, "Would you believe they're cleaning it up?" So this here is a patch of annual ryegrass on the right and our bayou kale on the left. It's become a real popular cover crop, and it's excellent in forages. A couple things you need to know about. Do not ever turn cattle in a pure sward of a brassica. In about 10 week or so, they will start dying. And I don't know all the science, but just trust me. And that includes turnips, rape, whatever. It takes about 10 days for the rumen to shift to be able to handle it. But on the other hand, one of the advantages of the brassicas is the root exudates from the brassicas breaks the calcium phosphorus bond. So it makes phosphorus and sulfur more available for the soil. This is our, on the left, it's our Seminole Ladino clover. It's a Ladino, which really all it means is it's a big leaf and it grows up taller. But this, our variety was also selected out of some Haifa, which was bred in Israel. And then on the right is a Persian clover, our Mihai, and it's an annual clover, but comes on almost as fast as Balanza, which you may have heard some of, but it's a little more winter hardy, and it goes later. Balanza is very early. Mihai, for example, Balanza will harvest in June, Mihai in 1st August, so it stays greener longer. And the Persian clover, the stems can get quite large. I've seen them flat like that wide. So one year the extension agent said, let's do a protein test post-harvest. This had been sun-dried, dried up. It was only 14% protein in those stems. And the sheep, which we graze, they're happy with it. Buckhorn plantain. It's sad, it's illegal for us to sell that in 35 states. But it has one unreal amount of health benefits for the soil and for animals, including chickens. In New Zealand, they're having trouble with water in the groundwater on nitrogen in the groundwater on grazing dairies. If they put a small percentage of plantain in there, it reduces the nitrogen in the manure and urine. Do any of you know if a cow takes a urination here, what that equates to of pounds N per acre? New Zealanders say 4,000. That's why it stays green forever. But it'll not only reduce the amount of N, it does that by making a percentage of the protein bypass. So their studies show they'll either give about 10% more milk and or 10% more meat on them. Chickens, it's good for them. Some of them feeding the seed, just 1% or so of the ration. It's just unreal how little it takes. It's a natural wormer because of the tannins. It's also active on coccidiosis. Here's a mixture of the couple pastures we planted, white clover and chicory on the left, same field, different half with plantain. Now, the sad thing is, and we just figured out why, animals grazed on that all summer. When fall come, we got some cloudy weather. First year we lost 1 or 2, bloated. Looked like, and they bloated to where, I didn't have a picture. They actually blew open. Took them over to the vet lab, and well, they just bloated, that was all. Well, this year we were grazing pure seed stock field of chicory. Cattle had been on it 2 weeks. About 6, 8 days into it, I told the cattle herd, you need to come and look at these cattle, because I could see a little bit of bloat. Well, he fooled around until he had 2 dead. Now, they didn't blow open. But I can't believe that if it was pure protein or too hot a feed, it took 2 weeks to get to them. And it was nitrate poisoning, what these are. And so I've done quite a little studying on that. I haven't put it up, I'm putting it together, but I personally had heard about that word, but I'd never heard of it. The other thing that's interesting, we have an invasive subtropical water rat called nutria. And we had some of them grazing along some of this chicory field, seed field, and for 6 weeks I have not seen them. And they say that monogastrics can be killed by nitrates too. So this gives you a little idea of what the bayou can be when spring planted too late to vernalize. And then the left field's just another white clover. But they turned the sheep in and they ate that down to stems and then started eating on the stems. And my son-in-law went in and flail chopped it, and it came back and he took a seed crop, so that shows you the benefits. Now, the other thing I should say about, oh wait. This is spotted burr medic, and the medics are an annual, but they do quite well, like in Texas, at less than 17 inches of rain. The biggest problem is the seed. Because it is a burr, there's 2 seeds in that burr. So if you're really going to get the most out of it, you got to grind it up. And a friend in Australia said, yes, he could sell me burr medic, or not burr medic, but a variety of medic. I think it has places in an annual pasture. Hairy vetch, it's unreal the amount of demand we're getting for hairy vetch now, but I defy you to have any other show me any other temperate species that will produce the amount of nitrogen hairy vetch will. 150 plus pounds an acre would not surprise me. And this here is strawberry clover. I tried to show you a bloom here because they actually look like just a strawberry once they start to mature. It has a taproot, does extremely well does good in dry weather. I think it would be excellent in this climate because they use it in the mountains of California. And if you plant a pound in just a short time, that whole paddock will, because the livestock move it by grazing the heads. It's not a big producer. On the other hand, if you have a legume growing, then you're probably getting some nitrogen fixation. And that's a Seminole again. That's probably about 20th of June to 1st of July time frame. Blantz of clover. And then this here is a way, if I don't know, do any of you have trouble with slugs? Well, anyway, the best way to scout for them is a cabbage leaf in the evening, and the next morning you'll know. They just go to it over anything. Another summer feed, a little more the stage you should be grazing. This is our shield mustard. It's going into the cover crop some. I also, in our area, will put it in a fall pasture mix for quick feed because it's already about like this or taller. Fodder beets. The New Zealanders used to run on the dairies, they run their cattle off to usually, or their milk cows, to farmers who grow feed for them. Used to be primarily the bayou kale type of plants. They have now brought in fodder beets because they produce about 3 times the dry matter. I think they have a real potential if somebody has some summer land where they can grow them with some water for fall, early winter. But they are low in calcium. So you either got to supplement pretty heavy or plant a row of brassica, a row of turnips, or fodder beets, and cross graze them. Then they'll take care of it, and that's what a lot of the New Zealanders do. And they will stick out of the ground about their soil surface or so. And cows, livestock, once they get onto them, they'll eat them right out of the ground just like a turnip. I also have become a real believer in if you've got pasture and things like chicory, plantain, and a few others are short-lived perennials. This seed here, these broadleaves, there's mustard, a little bayou kale, little chicory, was put on either 1 or 2 years ago this winter, and that's what's there this fall. Now, it wouldn't be there had I not planted it. And one of the reasons I like to include brassicas, I've now found that there is a glucosinolate in brassicas that's also an animal wormer. We know animals are worms or nematodes. We know there's the brassicas, some of them are nematicides to soil nematodes. My problem right now is I can't find a lab that'll test for me. So, working on that. 2 new cover crops that I've stumbled on. The metaphome on the left, I'm one of the first 3 commercial growers in '76. And I'm so smart, it took me up to about 4 years ago to realize it causes nitrogen to be fixed. Our employees in the Midwest and people we see, well, why don't you recommend the metaphome? Oh, hell, it don't produce any forage. And the reason is it's a succulent, and it'll get about this tall. And when we harvest it, the ground will hardly have a dust on it because we got to grind it hard. But it's unreal the amount of nitrogen it causes to be fixed. And I stress cause. I can't find a scientist yet to work with me, see if we can prove why. This sugar beet here this picture was taken about the 15th of September. The 10th of June, this area was bare. That sugar beet plant has come up and got up there to around 4+ inches in diameter. When you take a potentiometer and try to push it in there right within the first ½ inch, it'll damn near fall on the ground. You go out this far, and it's a pointed one, you won't hardly get the point started. It's that hard. And it's just unreal. And if you ever dig up a sugar beet or a chicory root, it'll blow your mind, the soil life around them, the worms and stuff. Well, that's easy with a sugar beet. The reason for chicories is it produces an inulin, which is a complex carbohydrate. And so the soil life just thriving on that. So and the other thing about chicory, we also know it's a natural wormer. Give you a little idea, 30, 40 years ago, this was typical what we do for fall tillage on our what we call white Dayton soils. On our farm, my son-in-law I'd started, and since mid-90s, basically very little residue's been removed. The straw on the tall fescues is just left, flail chopped, annual ryegrass. Annual ryegrass will usually be no-tilled into either metaphome or white clover and take 4 to 7, 8 crops, volunteer. Chop the straw, fertilize it, harvest it. And this here would happen to be fescue with 5 crops of tall fescue. I do think the straw was removed 1 year, and then no-tilled the peas, and this is all this fall's tilling. On the other hand, this was a chicory seed stock field. And can't tell me there isn't aggregation there, and it's just that much. I don't know what all, but the point is it's really beneficial. That's it. Is there any frangipans? Any of you involved with frangipan soils? Because that's a big problem in Kentucky, Tennessee, Georgia, million+ acres. And a scientist down there by the name of Lloyd Murdoch has proved that the root exudates from annual ryegrass, if they grow a winter cover crop of annual ryegrass, the next year they'll have 1 inch of new soil. The root exudates dissolve that frangipan. Just checking to make sure I the other thing I stumbled on about 10 days ago, there's a glucosinolate in brassicas that works on the cancer cell surface to make it more receptive to chemo. So I'm telling any of my friends that are on chemo, get to eating your broccoli and your cabbage and your whatever, you know, Brussels sprouts, etc. I don't know which one yet, but it don't do any good till I find a lab. The other thing you'll notice I didn't mention orchard grass. And the only people I will recommend orchard grass to anymore is a horse farmer in our world, because our horses are overfed. We have a fair amount of trouble with flounder, you know, founder, whatever. And it's just, but the reason I don't recommend orchard grass, it's the lowest sugar grass there is. Now, if that's all the animal has, he'll do pretty fair on it. But there's some in my pasture, and if I want to know how my cattle are, you know, how the cows are doing on grass, if I go out there and the orchard grass is still up like this and everything's like that, well, they still got feed because they won't eat it till they have to. Now, we have a sorghum here called Sudan grass that we grow, and it's one of the reasons it's a fine stem. One of the reasons it works in our climate, we get cold nights. You know, we can get down in the 60s or even high 50s at night. Well, some of the older sorghum, some of the newer ones will take it, but some of the older ones, it just shuts them down. Just like everybody thought we could grow soybeans because it's dry. Well, we forgot soybeans can take dry if they have humidity. Extension agent Mike Plummer, who's deceased now, told me that if the temperature on a soybean drops below 70 degrees, it can shut it down for a few days. So that's one of the reasons. The other thing is Sudan grass is a high accumulator of nitrates. And we had a customer a few years ago that he made Sudan grass hay, and it was so high in nitrates, thank heavens he tested it, that he had to find a consumer that could dilute it. But if you suspect that, the nitrates are more concentrated the closer to the ground. So cut it up a ways. So I think that's about all I have, except for questions, if there's any.
Out in your area, you guys grow any teff grass?
Teff?
Yeah, teff.
Yeah.
So what do you think of teff? Because where I'm at, I actually don't grow a lot of teff. Right,
well, it's excellent hay.
Yeah.
Horses, I mean, the people in our area hay. I would say 85–90% of ours actually seed for seed stock.
Yeah, that's exactly where I get from.
Yeah. I do have a couple houndouts here. One of them is what I would typically recommend for a pasture in our area. The other thing is, as some of you might be aware, a large percentage of Oregon is sagebrush. And I'm convinced in my studies that if people could see a picture of that world in 1700, they'd be blown away how much grass there is. Some of those areas get less than 12 inches of rain to blow your mind how much water runs off. That ground is like this. Central and eastern Oregon, a lot of that dry area, was settled with sheep. There was a place there called Shanneco in Oregon. It was the largest wool capital, wool shipping point in the world. The railroad built a track up there just for that. And if you read the book, there was herders that had 20,000 ewes. Well, I contend on what is any harder on a pasture than a sheep? Horse, because they'll eat it shorter. But you take these native species and you graze them very tough more than twice a year, you'll kill them. That country was made a desert by settlers in not knowing any different. I'm convinced. So I got a mixture here, got everything in it, just in case something would work, because we got to build the soil before we can do anything. So, and we're giving that to people to try if they'll try it. And of course, a lot of people look at me like, what are you talking about? But anyway, I'm convinced that could be a different world. And go ahead.
Have you ever had any experience with carposate poisoning from brassica leaves?
For what?
Carposate poisoning from brassica leaves?
Well, I think that's what I'm talking about, isn't it? By having is that animals that have been on it some time, or some that are just turned in the first?
Just turned in the first
well, that's what I'm talking about. That's why you got to have the room and shift. You want to, For example, I had about a fourth of my pasture planted to mustard one year, and I can see it from my house. Mustard was about this tall first part of February, and I said, do I want to let them in a little and take them out or what? And I said, you know, you idiot, you can watch the pasture. So I turned the cows in. I'd go out there every day or so, and you couldn't hardly find a leaf that had been touched. Between day 10 and day 20, they ate it to the ground. Now sheep, no problem. It's just like sheep can graze tansy ragwort and kill it. And that's just the difference in the rumen. So, but there's a lady I met a few years ago that bought a ranch down near Burns, which is southeastern Oregon, which is fairly dry. And she had this draw went up the hillside. So they went in and cut the junipers. Next year, the stream was running all summer. And I'd heard that about 30 years ago in a publication. So sometime later, she cut up on the hillside 80 acres of junipers. They could no longer make hay in their bottom, it's too wet. A juniper tree takes 60 gallons of water a day in August, only 20 in June. You figure that out, that's a lot of water after a while. So anyway, worthless information, but I think it's a little bit of what you're talking about here, about the different grazing this morning, you know, rotational, giving plants a chance to build. That's all. We don't have to worry about that as much, but if we do a sloppy job of rotational grazing, we can increase our forage 20 to 30%. So it does have a place. Any other questions? Yes?
Do you graze that meadow foam?
No. Now, the only thing I ever saw really eat it was I had a field one time that had some trees in it, and there was nothing else, and the quail worked on it. I've seen that a couple times. And I always thought there was some problems grazing it because of the plant. Well, this year a guy baled some hay that had some volunteer meadow foam in it. And so I got concerned, so I called the different scientists I knew, and they said, oh, they don't think there's any problem. And there wasn't. Fact is, its horses really liked it. Now, it was diluted. All right, thank you. But it was diluted. But there's just, I mean, I think it has a real place in cover crops. The two things you want to remember I didn't share. Meadow foam needs cool soil temperatures to germinate. Where it was originally selected by OSU in the early 70s was up on Mount Shasta, where they had these water ponds and stuff, and as the water evaporated, meadow foam would come up and grow and make seed. On the contrary, as most of you probably know, sugar beets prefer soil temperatures above 70. And I think the sugar beet, I've got a couple organic farmers now planting it in their corn rows, because the beauty of it, it'll winter kill. And if that can, and that root on a companion of that sugar beet, we stopped digging at 44 inches this fall. So, and hard soil, it pushed out a little, but it still was probably that deep before it got down to much under an inch in diameter. So, well, she said I was near done, so if you want some papers, I'll even lay out some business cards. I like to talk in case you didn't notice, and I pretend to know something.
We have time if there's more questions.
Well, they think I didn't have enough to know to help them. Anyway, so yes, sir.
Is there maybe a combination of these that you wouldn't put together?
Okay, since you answered that, if somebody at home wants me to make a recommendation, first thing I ask them if they got a soil test. Oh yeah, my pH is fine. No. I want to see what your iron, aluminum, manganese is. Because pH is only an indicator. We had two fields, 5.2 and 5.4. White clover's doing fine. Wouldn't grow here unless I put nitrogen on it. Fortunately, I had a friend do a soil test. We got it got it back. A couple days later, an agronomist from one of the national companies is there. I threw it down. Oh, he says, hell, that's easy. I said, what do you mean? He says, I've never seen iron at 1,000 parts per million. I put 1,000 pounds of Cottrell flour on, and in 10 days, you swear to gosh, I'd thrown fertilizer on. And I didn't quite get the whole field done, and you could go out there, and it was just this difference. And you could dig it up, and the nodules, they were just beautiful where it had that little bit of lime. So the secret is, I didn't change the soil pH, I only changed the soil solution. That wasn't enough changing much. The other thing to keep in mind, you should, unless you're high in molybdenum, you should always put molly on legumes, because that's a poor man's lime, and I haven't seen it not benefit nodules. So, are you selenium deficient? Huh? Okay, skip that one. We are. So, okay.